How's it going, everyone? I'm Pedantic Gamer, and today I'm looking at Dark Souls, and more importantly I'm actually going to be talking about Dark Souls 2 and what I think about what we know so far now. There have been some pretty disturbing comments regarding what the game is going to be like, and there has been a fairly significant change in who's actually making the game. Ooh, my mouse is screen a little bit, I'll just move that off. So in Dark Souls 2, there's a new director. The director who did Demon's Souls and both Dark Souls has been moved on to another project. It seems from interviews that it wasn't his choice to move on, it was rather came from up above, it was the management's decision. And that's fairly disappointing because a huge amount of what makes Dark Souls is of course as a result of the director. But nonetheless, that's not really what I'm wanting to talk about. What I'm wanting to talk about is, firstly, what I think needs to be improved in Dark Souls. And without a doubt, the thing that needs to be fixed more than anything else is the actual multiplayer portion of the game. At least on PC, and I remember it on Xbox as well, it is fairly damn horrible. Now, on PS3, Demon's Souls ran rather well. Getting people to join your world or to invade other people's worlds was generally fairly easy, and I believe used dedicated servers as opposed to peer-to-peer. And I've already got that. Which of course was very beneficial, and to this day Demon's Souls it is still very easy to invade other people's players or summon other phantoms, which is whereby another player, or you're summoned into another player's world if you so choose to let that occur. But in Dark Souls you can spend 20-30 minutes and get nowhere. You'll be trying to get someone you know to summon you, and you just can't do it even though you're both at the same spot, and it's just a gigantic pain really. And the invasion system isn't much better. On top of that, when you actually invade someone, it generally turns into a game of just circle strafing the other player to try and get a backstab, as opposed to anything that requires any skill. Because a backstab, more or less in PvP from what I've seen, always kills the enemy player in one shot, which means all you're doing is running around in circles like so. Which I'm not going to bother backstabbing these guys because I don't need to. Oh shit. And it's something that really does need to be improved. I remember Demon's Souls didn't really have that issue. Oh god. Which was of course very nice, because when you play it, if all you're doing is circle strafing, it becomes very tedious and not very skill based. It basically becomes whoever lags out the most or lags out the least, I'm not sure which one would cause it, actually wins the game. And I'm going to die. Run away. Which is something I'd like to see improved. Also, the entire system needs to be rethought about how you can connect to players. Maybe have a simple option whereby you can actually select... Oh god, I died, didn't I? Oh my god. I died against such a basic enemy, and the little guy spin around in circles. Which I'll get into in a moment as well. They really need to fix that system whereby you will just be constantly looking for players to join, and actually getting someone you know to join your game is an absolute pain. Now there is a new engine, and I'm going to talk briefly about that because what you saw before was some interesting ragdoll physics, and actually when I kill these two guys again you will see what I mean. I'll try and dive over them and get them to connect to my body, and it's just absolutely ludicrous what happens. The bodies like tangle up with you, and even the stone guardians that just killed me, for example, lose all sense of weight when they die. So you can flip them around, and it just takes a lot of the actual weight away from the game, you see. It just looks silly. And given that a huge part of Dark Souls is the actual world and exploring the world and discovering it, that really does actually hurt the game in my eyes. Now in some cases it might work to an extent, but for example when these massive stone guardians, once again the thing that just killed me, do that as well, when there's this incredible sense of weight behind them beforehand, it really doesn't work. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say about the PvP and the PvE part of the game. But there is a new engine being used, and it's almost impossible not to mention it, because at the moment I am playing this on PC with the DS fix, which basically means it's a PC game. Before the DS fix, it was just the console game, exactly as it was on console with the DLC, running without any PC features whatsoever. For example, the ability to change your resolution was not really there. All it did was scale it at its original resolution of 1024 by 720, I believe, and upscale it to whatever resolution you want. It just basically means stretching the image out, which is of course not really acceptable for a PC game. On top of that, I understand the textures were never going to be improved for this release. The game was not ever intended to come to PC, it was just an actual afterthought basically. PC gamers petitioned for it essentially, and that's why we got it. And I'm very glad we got it. But now that they're actually developing it with PC in mind, with Dark Souls 2, and there is a new engine, there really is no excuse for a bad port, and here's a good example of the Stone Guardian just losing all sense of weight. This needs to be gone. It was in Demon Souls as well, it's in Dark Souls. Especially when it's meant to be a Stone Guardian. Sometimes you can get it to actually sit in part of your body. Yeah, that just really takes away from the actual game in my eyes. So hopefully they can fix that, which, given that they are using a new engine, they should be able to. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about is possibly even more concerning regarding some comments regarding the game. And I'm not actually that concerned, but it could be problematic if it turns out to go the way that some people are fearing. And that is that they've been talking about making the game easier, or having an easy mode now. Personally, I don't find Dark Souls to be that hard. It basically just punishes you for any mistakes you made. For example, I died against these guys before because I was silly and wasn't paying attention. It wasn't really because the fight was hard, because it isn't. I can even bypass the fights if I want to, or draw them off one at a time. And basically there's very few enemies in this game that are hard to defeat if you draw them off one at a time. I'm a little bit overpowered for this area, I think, though. But from what I understand, the director's aim, the new director that is, and this is why I think a lot of the concerns exist, is he said he wants to have the start more easily digested, more or less. So the game's going to start off easier and then get harder. And if that's the case, I don't really see the issue, because it is kind of a game that can be brutally unforgiving. Now, I personally didn't find the start to be very hard. In fact, I don't find the game to be hard at all. What it is, oh god, unforgiving like that. You make a mistake, you die, but once again, possibly the worst time to talk about difficulty when I'm just getting owned because of my own silliness, but it's kind of demonstrating what I'm trying to say. Nothing here is hard, it's just me being silly and trying to rush it. It's more a game of patience than anything, and actually learning how to fight the different enemies. And then you back off because it's going to do that thing again, which was severely damaging me. Simple. It of course does result in some cheap deaths because you don't know how to fight the enemies yet. And I've drawn off more enemies, which is not optimal. He didn't pull it out of the ground that time. Almost out of his stas flasks as well. Now the other thing lastly before I finish this commentary that I wanted to talk about is the tone of the game. And more or less they seem to be trying to go for the same tone, at least based on the director's comments. But he did say one thing that was interesting, that he wanted to create also a tone of a sense of sorrow. Now, I'm not entirely sure how they're going to do that. They could do it a very basic way. They could have it so by you have to kill things that you don't really want to kill, but it needs to be killed in order to be able to actually get to your main objective. But that would be a fairly cheap way of doing it, I feel, so I'm very interested to see what they actually plan to do with that and how they actually aim to do it. And that's not where I want to be going. I've come from... is it? I can't recall. And it'll be interesting to see how they actually pull that off, and if they're actually able to pull that off, because the idea of bringing sorrow into this world, whereby the bosses are generally these absolutely disgustingly and brilliantly designed, grotesque creations, is something I'm not sure how they're going to do. Now, there are a few exceptions to that, whereby the bosses are actually rather magnificent looking in this game, but I still didn't get any sense of sorrow when I killed them. It was just... I don't know how they're going to pull it off without resorting to cheap tactics, which is something I would hope they don't do. I am kind of surprised to see that it's being called Dark Souls 2. I was kind of expecting it to be a different world yet again, like Demon Souls was to Dark Souls, or Dark Souls was to Demon Souls, I guess would be the proper way to say it. So I am surprised in to that extent, but I'm actually kind of glad to explore this world more, because I think that's what this game is ultimately very well known for. It's the actual exploration of the world that people enjoy more so than anything else. And I don't know why this guy is ignoring me. And I just missed him. And missed him again. Oh god. What is this guy doing? I bet he's going to turn around and destroy me now. Nope, he's still walking away. That's bizarre. And I guess that's one thing that I'm not sure if you should improve or not, but the enemy AI can be pretty all over the place. As in, they just do these weird things at times, or they'll jump off a cliff in an attempt to dodge you. Or they'll do that and fall through the ground completely. And what the? Did he fall down here? But he's over there now. I don't know what to make of that. How could he? I guess he could have jumped down. Looked like he fell down over here though. So there are things that definitely need improvement in Dark Souls, or definitely could be improved, but overall I hope they don't change the tone of the game too much. The idea of introducing sorrow to the tone is an interesting one to me. I'm not sure how well it's going to be pulled off, or if it's something that's even going to suit the game, but really the main things I want to see improved is, of course, Games for Windows Live on the PC version to be removed, because Games for Windows Live is absolutely terrible. I'd like a better PC port. But more importantly, I would like the actual online systems to be, well, actually one of the few areas I want the game to be streamlined, because, let's face it, Dark Souls Online can just be an absolute pain in the ass. When it takes 10-15 minutes to connect to someone, that's if you're able to even connect to them, that's really far too long. Where this game does succeed is the world it creates and exploring it, and the combat is of course fantastic, and of course the combat could be tweaked further as it was from Demon Souls to Dark Souls. I don't really know how to comment on that, and I've attracted all the enemies at once, I think. So run away. But ultimately, the main area I think that needs to be improved is just the online system. It's this very interesting idea that was worked extremely well in Demon Souls, but seems to work significantly worse in Dark Souls. And I'm not going to fight two of these guardians at once, that would be suicide for me at the moment. Well, I do have one flask yet left. I do want to get through here. Ooh, and I can go down. I think that's a Black Knight over there, possibly. And a boss through here, I would say, which I'm not prepared for. The last thing, which I think I've said more than once now, that I want to talk about regarding Dark Souls 2, is the directors talked about making the game more straightforward. And that's again something I'm not sure, for the most part, I actually want to see. I'm not sure what this guy said because I wasn't paying attention, so I'm going to run away and answer it later. And I think I can set up a shortcut here. Yes, I can. That's nice. So, it depends really what he means by that, because some of the actual things you need to do to get to certain areas, for example in Dark Souls to get back to the Asylum where you start off so you can get certain items there, and there's another boss there once you go back, are just extremely obscure. For example, to get to this area, which is from the Prepare to Die DLC, I actually needed a guide. Yes, I needed a guide to figure out how to access the DLC in this game. That is just... that's far too obscure in my opinion. If you actually need a guide, or most people need a guide to be able to access DLC, you're probably doing something wrong, or it's a sign of bad game design. However, at the same time, I do like that the game doesn't actually hand you, well, now go do this, then do this, etc. It says, you're in this world now, figure out what you're going to do. Figure out which way you're going to go. You might go to areas that are not powerful enough to actually face, and vice versa. You're too powerful and it's just an absolute cakewalk. But I really do like that. I like that it doesn't hold your hand the whole time. But at the same time, some things are a little bit too obscure, and if you're going to have it that obscure and rely people to rely on guides, you probably need something in-game that's suggestive or gives you an idea of what you have to do, or that you can even go back to the asylum, because I didn't even realise from playing the game you could go back to the asylum until someone told me. And then I actually figured that one out on my own, how to get back to the asylum. But for example, getting to this DLC, I tried for over an hour just to try and get to the DLC. I knew that it was in the actual where you fought the Hydra, you could do it, but it was just so bizarre. If you want to know how you have to unlock the DLC, you have to firstly kill the Hydra. Then if you go to the left, after you go to a bonfire, I believe you have to go back to a bonfire. You then can kill another crystal enemy that's to the far left, that then reveals NPC, who then, if you say yes to, will disappear. Then if you go to another part of the, well, very far away, it's probably like a 15-minute trek if you've beaten all the bosses already, there'll be another crystal enemy there that wasn't there before, that if you kill will drop a certain item, which then if you go back to near where the Hydra was, there'll be a black portal which will allow you to access the DLC areas. Now, I'm surely not alone in thinking that that's a bit too obscure to really be understood by most players or be actually figured out without using the guide. I don't think I'm alone there, and if that's what he means by making the game more straightforward, I'm all for it. But I do hope that doesn't actually take away from the exploration of the world in any way, shape or form, because that would be a real shame. Anyway, those are just my initial thoughts on Dark Souls 2 and where I think I have some concerns and where I think improvements need to be made. Anyway, this is Pedantic Gamer. I do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I do hope to see you next time.
Let me guess. Snatched by a shadowy limb and dragged off to the past? Yes, of course. Exactly what happened to me. We are both strangers in this strange land. But at least now there are two of us.